You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, VA Bass Nation Kayak Series, Scott Skinner. Scott, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. Did you think you'd be in this position?
I thought there was a chance. I definitely looked at the schedule when it came out this year and was like, oh yeah, like that's what I want to devote my effort to. And I thought, I definitely thought I had a better chance of getting AOI with bass than I did NVKBA, just because part of it's like it's really hard for me to come from Richmond to the res and practice a bunch. It's just like you're at the wheel of I-95 repeatedly, and that's not very fun. So I was like, oh, let me devote my effort to something like that. And I was really, I was waiting for there to be a statewide trail. I've always wanted that because there's so many cool fisheries that just get overlooked just solely because of where the clubs end up being placed in the state. And they stay within their little area and fish their little spots over and over again. And so it's cool to see somewhere that's going to, show out some of these places that really haven't gotten big kayak tournaments before.
Yeah, and with that said, I mean, Sean put it together a great schedule. I'm going to be having Sean on later in October, but again, we're going to start with Briery Creek, Sandy Reservoir, going to the Shenandoah, Chick Lake, Chick River, and then the Upper Potomac. Going straight into it, what is your experience on Sandy and Briery Creek?
Not much. I fished both in February, early March a couple of times. I think most of the times I'd fished it was before I even had a graph on the kayak. So they didn't really go all that well. I didn't really know what to do. I knew that it was going to be definitely one of the more difficult ones on this schedule for me. Practice went horrible. I didn't really find anything. But I ended up day of finding a little live scope pattern, used my Randy Blockett cheater box, and found a couple. And then later in the day, they pushed up shallow, and I could catch a couple how I really wanted to. I lost 2 or 3 good ones that definitely would have made a big difference. But it's hard to be mad. I mean, I had 4 fish, and I was in 6th. So it's like I was on the big ones. It just, hard to keep them pinned. But it was a good tournament, and that place really showed out at the top end of the leaderboard. People caught them. And talk about 2 really cool fisheries that both kick out giants and aren't even really that similar.
It really is, and I like how you said cheater box there, because the schedule is kind of balanced where, you have 2 events where, good luck trying to use a cheater box there when you can basically wade the whole time. So
yeah,
that really helps. And, Tyler Bumgarner put on a show there, great event. There's so many big damn fish in that lake, and you survived it. And going into this year, were you always thinking AOI, or was there a point where your mind was, hey, this is an AOI, something I want to compete for?
Oh, no. I definitely went in with intention. I was like, I want to win AOI for bass. I always wanted to for NVKBA, but again, the schedule, all the events I'm driving up there. And, that's still on the hit list for me, but right now it's all gas, no brakes bass. And if the schedules continue to be this cool, it's going to be hard to step away from too. Because Sean's done a great job not only running the tournaments, but talk about a schedule.
It's a great schedule. It really is. And again, I've said this on numerous occasions, but Sean took advantage of what makes kayak so cool is you can go to places that you can't really have boat tournaments, and doing Sandy and Briery Creek, that's alluring. I knew a lot of guys when that dropped, they're like, ooh, this is a cool way to start the season. I've never been there before. I want to go there just for, even if just the fun aspect, which I really appreciate that.
Yeah. For me, it's I'm a tournament angler. I love fishing tournaments, but a good solid chunk of that is just it's super cool how every fishery fish is totally different, especially from a tournament strategy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And in the kayak, as opposed to the bow, you just get like such a deeper, like, catalog of places that like are so much vastly different than each other. Like, I mean, you compare like Upper Potomac to the Res to Sandy to Chick River, and it's just like these places are all totally different. And to fish them all well, you have to be so, well rounded as an angler, which is super alluring to me. And that's part of what makes kayak tournament fishing so cool.
No, totally agree with you. So you get done with Briary in the Sandy event, and the next one on the docket is Shenandoah River. How did you want to break down that place? You have the main stem, North Fork, South Fork. How did you go about figuring out where to start?
I'm not gonna lie. I like my second or third time ever floating the Shenandoah, I stumbled upon a float that is really special. Obviously, I'm not going to say it here because if I ever have to fish there again, it'll probably have a couple extra people, and there's already been a couple other people who have found it and they're like locked in on it. But I mean, I knew from that moment on, like that's where I'm going. Until it gets worse, that's probably where I'll be going. But it fishes really well. It has a lot of quality fish. There's a little chance that you won't, run into the good numbers you need to fill out a limit, like if you're not on them. But it's worth the risk reward being on better fish, in my opinion, especially for a smallmouth event where it's like an 18, 19, 20. Those go a long way. So I was like, okay, I'll lock in on that. And I did pretty well. It was hard to fish a little bit because I was there with some very competent anglers. I was on the same float as Daniel, who won it. And it was just interesting, like watching him fish. Like he's a hammer smallmouth dude, and like I watched him fish all day, and he like spent the whole float standing. It's like I've never watched someone roll through rapids like on a surfboard like that.
It's yeah. Daniel really knows how to break down the Shenandoah. And guys, if you want to go check out that episode, I had Big D on. He broke down area and how he did it all. But being able to stand is so important on certain smallie events, and making sure you get a kayak that lets you stand is also really important.
Yep. Yeah, no, it was definitely, that was an interesting event. We hit it at a good time of year, and I think it was fishing pretty well. So I knew that it was going to be hard to stack up against some of those river rat doe guys. I think I'm pretty decent on the Shenandoah, but it's like, it's always going to be hard to compete with some of those local guys who are just on it every single day. You know what I mean? It's just like, but that's also part of the fun. It's like, see how you stack up against them. Sometimes you can beat them, and that's always, feels like a big accomplishment, just as big as winning,
So you finish the Shenandoah event, you survive in points. That gets you to, again, like, I guess it'd be more like your home water in August. You're at the Chick River and Chickahominy Lake. How much time did you practice for that event?
I remember we had a good couple of weeks leading up to. I knew someone would crack a bag out of the lake, and I knew that like I probably had a better chance of finding them on the river. But in the back of my head, I was like, I'm gonna save like one practice day for the river because I know it pretty well, and I thought like that's pretty much all I need. So I dumped a lot of time into the lake. I thought it was fishing pretty tough, but I knew someone was going to find them. So I was just concerned with getting the right river fish after that would be able to keep up with the lake fish because, obviously Chick River kicks out giants. I don't know if you saw that one caught earlier this season that was like 14 or something ridiculous.
It was a monstrous.
Yeah, like it has them, but I think like on average lengthwise, the lake probably has a little bit stronger of an advantage. And the way that event was balanced out too, the tides were pretty good for the river, so it did feel pretty even. It's August. That's definitely not when the lake's at its strongest, I don't think. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go with the river, and I did all right. I definitely didn't expect as many people to be where I was. I thought my spot was a little bit sneakier than it was, and maybe a bunch of people just saw a ramp that had camping spots, and they were like, "Oh, go there," because that was a travel event for a good amount of people. But either way, that was a really good one. some great bags came out of both fisheries, which really surprised me. That was awesome.
Why did that surprise
Uh, I really thought that it was going to lean one way or the other, especially with the way Sandy and Briary went. It seemed like Sandy had just had a better day, just with how the fishery set up. And I kind of thought, it was either going to be like, oh, the tide's going to kick at some point and all those dudes are just going to launch ahead. But it ended up staying seemingly pretty close for most of the day. I know it was one out of the river, which is definitely like, that was morale boosting. I was like, okay, next time I go, if it's in August again, I'm definitely going to feel bad about the river like I was. I kind of thought in my head, like, someone knows Chick Lake, like, especially like, obviously I was right on Tyler's tail this whole season so far. And, now he's on my tail, but it was like, I'd seen one of his Turnieks tournaments from like 2 years ago, and he had like 98 inches out of the lake. So I was like, okay, I can count on Tyler to find him on the lake. So I thought, it very well might be this is another survival event, despite it being my home water. But I did all right. If I could have done a couple things different, I definitely would have. But part of it was just, dodging people all day. When you're in a crowd of people, there's only so much you can do.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a great event. I thought that that time of year with those tides, the lake and the river stacked up almost perfect, and that made for a pretty cool event.
At the end of that event, where was your head at going into, the last piece of the season?
I was really excited. I knew that the Upper Potomac was really low. A lot of guys were worried about that. But in my head, I was like, if it's going to be tough, and I knew from previous experience, it didn't really seem like, because where I had gained a leg up on Tyler in the AOI race was at the Shenandoah. So I was like, okay, another smallmouth event. Maybe I can gain another leg up here. And I knew it was going to be tough. So I was like, a tougher tournament, in my opinion, is always easier to win than a slugfest. When it's a slugfest, they're everywhere, they're biting everywhere. It's like, it's anyone's game. It almost becomes more about landing the right ones. So I felt pretty confident. I had enough time to practice. I was like, I'm just going to go up there, float a ton, motor around a ton, see a ton of water, look at some stuff. And, past years I hadn't really done that well on Upper Potomac, but that really didn't play into my mindset at all. I felt like, this is where I could turn some things around, maybe get it in my favor. And man, I mean, my first practice day was horrible. Like, I'm talking like 1 14-incher bad. I was like, oh, this is rough. But I was looking on a map, and the Upper Potomac, like, it's not really like the Shenandoah where you have a lot of like these big breaking current breaks where
Riffles.
Like fish cannot travel between areas. It's like they have a long stretch they can travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew where I was, and I knew that they weren't there. And I was like, all right, let me try the total opposite area. And I just was thinking like, man, it's so low here. There's no way they could be here. I don't know where these fish are. And at some point in the day on my second practice day, I pulled up past some like subtle looking stuff on the bank, and I was like, oh, that looks kind of good. And I mean, I sacked up like 92 inches in like 12 casts. So it was just like a complete 180 as far as like confidence goes. It's like you go from like, I don't know what's going on to like, okay, find more of that. And day 3 of practice, exact same thing. I mean, like at this point, like I was like, for some reason I thought the event was a week earlier than it was. So I was like 2 or 3 weeks out, and I was like not sticking them. It's like I should have just hammered them probably, but at the same time, it's like such low water. I'm not sure how much they were moving, so maybe it was better to lay off them anyway. But I was just like trying to not stick them, and I was ending up with like low 90s. And I practiced one more time just to check up on them, and same thing. And I was like, I don't want to say I've won this thing, but like everyone that I talked to was like, oh, it's fishing like garbage. You're lucky if you have a limit. 75 inches will get you paid, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, I just don't know. Like, I guess, I kind of remembered. I was like, okay, the first practice that I had, I definitely would have agreed with that. But I mean, as far as, practice can go, best practice of my life, probably.
Yeah. And I like what you said there, because the fish on the Potomac migrate a lot more than the Shenandoah, and really this time of year it's the ends of the spectrum that really kind of work for that place, going up towards the confluence, or going all the way down to Lock 4 and below that, and
Yep.
those same fish that are down at Lock 4 at Great Falls in a month and a half will be up near the confluence. It's insane how much they migrate compared to the Shenandoah fish, and
Absolutely.
it's nerve-wracking because they are here today, gone tomorrow, and they can easily bounce on you compared to other places I've chased brown ones before.
Yeah, no, that's the total initial impression I got. I was like, oh, there was like a big migration of the quality fish, I felt like, down to where I went. And I was like, okay, this makes sense to me. They can totally traverse these areas without issue. And looking at the stuff I was looking at, I was finding them like in very subtle little holes, stuff that, like, I mean, honestly, it felt like trout fishing is what it felt like. Like you are walking down a stream and you see a little hole and you don't see any fish in it. And it's like barely any deeper, but it's just got that right amount of current. And then you cast in there and you see them move, and suddenly there's 5 16-inch fish in there. And you're like, where did they come from? Mm-hmm. But it's like, to survive in low water, they got to learn to hide, or else, you just get eaten by an osprey or whatever. So I was just like, I'm just going to, pick apart areas, look for these little key details. And I mean, it was a very technical and cool day out there, because it was just like, if you were just in it, I think it was tricky because a lot of guys, they think smallmouth tournament fishing, and earlier in the season, like, you can just go out and float a river like you're having fun and have a great tournament day. You know what I mean? Just like throw around a whopper plopper, throw net a little, maybe do a little cranking or spinner bait. And like when the water's up, you can have a great day just going around power fishing, having fun. But that definitely wasn't how this was going. And I knew that like a lot of people were probably going to approach it that way. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be like my chance to get ahead.
Did you practice all year and travel by yourself, or did you try to have like a group of people that you go to all the events with?
I mean, for me, a lot of times with the smallmouth stuff, I'll float with my brother. He is not as serious as I am about fishing, but he definitely like fishes differently than I am. And like when he starts catching them, it's like I can, get a little bit out of that info. And then, I mean, I've got a group chat that I'm in with like some solid NVKVA hammers, and a lot of those guys were fishing the trail this year. So it was like, always able to bounce ideas off, Frank Bogdan, hammer, Nathan Updike, hammer, Wade Schoonover, hammer, Eddie Butler, hammer. It's just like when you are surrounded, iron sharpens iron. And like when, you all come in after practice and you're like, all right, how'd everybody do? You can kind of, nobody ever wants to give up too much. Some guys are looser than others about it, but, it helps to get kind of like a field consensus always.
Does that help or hurt having too much information like that?
I think you just have to be cognizant. Like Frank and Wade are really good examples. Those guys don't fish at all like I do. I'm like wide open power fishing guy. Like I don't want to slow down. I don't want to throw the spinning rod. I want always a casting rod, always something moving. I want to be like fishing for aggressive fish. And they're very much not always like that way. And then like someone like Nathan, he's the same as I. It's like he's trying to find and biting. And so, you just got to kind of discern the information that way. Like, it's really hard to catch another man's fish. I heard on a podcast once, and it couldn't be more true. Mm-hmm. Everyone is so stylistically different, just how you learn to fish, who you learn from, what your bread and butter is, everyone's totally different. And so you got to kind of, someone might say, oh, I cracked them today, doing so-and-so, and like your version of doing so-and-so might be totally different than theirs. You know what I mean? There's so many different ways to fish any bait. it's just like, you can get into the nitty gritty, but even then it's like how you look at the water and just like read it. So it's like a fine line, it doesn't always, pan out. You can have, Jay Wheeler, KVD calling you on the phone, telling you where to fish, and you might not still crack them because, everybody's fish is different.
No, 100%, 100%. So with this tournament in the rearview mirror, what are your thoughts on the Smith Mountain Lake event?
It's going to be interesting. I went there not last year, but the year before, because before Bass was just doing state championships to give people a chance to qualify for the national stuff. And we fished Smith Mountain Lake, and it was fishing bad, like like really bad that year. At least when we went, it was like October, and I remember it was so bad that they got rid of the like minimum 12-inch limit. Like I think I had like an 8-incher in my bag, and I just called a 6-incher. So it's like, that wasn't the best impression, but like on paper, the place really looks like it could set up well for me. I don't have the most experience there, but I feel confident just given, it in some ways it just feels like Lake Anna, but good. Not to diss on Lake Anna too much, but, it definitely kicks out bigger ones. It kicks out some huge bags. There's a lot of water. Somewhere they're going to be biting. And, I'm excited to go try to break that place down. And I'm hoping we get a nice cold snap and, get some real fall fishing.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't think that's going to be happening, but we'll see. It's going to be a long Indian summer, at least so far it is, and we'll see how Lake Anna goes, and we'll see how the Smith Mountain Lake Championship goes here soon. So Scott, what were your things that you relied on the most just to get bit this year? If you had to pick your top couple of baits, just in general, that you always had on deck.
Let me just run it down by the event. I think that'd be the easiest way to do this. Sandy River was a jerk bait. Both soft and hard played a role. Lost a couple good ones on a shaky head. Doa, I was cranking, spinner bait, glide bait, all power. Then we went to Chick, and it was a little bit more tough in that regard. I had to do a little bit more junk fishing. I did a little bit of drop shot and caught a couple on top water. It was definitely one of those days where it's just like mix it up. And then on Upper Potomac, it was all the tube. Definitely with the gear these days, it's like, I feel like with all the pressure, it's like more people are fishing than ever. And then you have, people are just better at fishing than they ever have been. Like you can go and like look at like a Randy Blockett video where he's talking about fishing like the 70s and 80s. And he's like, yeah, I won like 15 events in a year on just a black jig with no trailer. And it's like, okay, so like the fish are learning. Like I don't think that's disputable, like they're not just you're not gonna go sack up 25 pounds. I mean, you could, someone could, but it's not like people are just running around cracking them with just a black jig with no trailer these days. Like, they're pressured. They know what a bait is. You really gotta, go that extra mile, in my opinion. And, you look at, the trends in Japan, which seem to be a pretty good indicator of like where things go stateside sometimes, just with, they have all that pressure out there, lower populations, they get hammered more. And then you have our populations, which are bigger, obviously, but there's still a ton of people out, a ton of people who are good at fishing. And, you see all these guys who are going either way big or way small. Everyone's getting away from that, crux, middle normal size bait, you know what I mean? And I think that's just part of pressure. I think that, there's still great days to be had. I don't think there's ever going to be a day where they stop biting a KVD 1.5. But it's just, you got to go a little extra mile nowadays. And for me, I've been leaning on both the glide bait thing a little bit more these days and also the BFS stuff. I see a lot of people diss on the BFS stuff. I think, a lot of tournament fishermen, they're all about functionality, and they just see that and they're like, that's stupid. Why would I not just use a spinning rod? Which I get, you know, I understand that. But at the same time, it was like, I was saying that exact same stuff about like tournament bait, like tournament glide bait fishing, you know, big baits in tournament situations. I was like, that's stupid. Like, how are you ever going to stack up 5 good ones fishing for 1 bite? And then I started to see guys do it, or at least, you know, like they'd sack up 4 and then like, okay, look for a kicker all day with a glide. And it's like, that makes sense, you know? It's pressured nowadays. Big fish are only getting smarter. They're only getting older. Show them that glide and, you know, you only need 1 bite, and that might be the difference between winning and losing. And I get that now. And it's the same thing with BFS to me. It's like, you know, there's all these applications, you know, boat wise, I kind of get it a little bit more like, yeah, all right. You guys don't have like smallmouth fisheries to the same extent river wise as we do, which is like a big player where BFS plays for me. But like even just like tidal stuff, you know, any tidal river you go to, you see that really tiny bait. You know, there's just like, and in the fall, you know, another great example, it's just like small bait, small bait, small bait. And it's like, yeah, you can go like fish that stuff with a spinning rod, but like, I don't know about you, but like, I hate cranking on a spinning rod.
Yeah, it sucks. The only option is maybe casting distance when it's like blowing at 100 miles an hour with winds. But besides that, it sucks.
Yeah, if you're trying to go down the bank and fish aggressive, and like you have to keep opening the bail and like watching that your line isn't twisting and all this other crap, it's like, you know, you can do the same thing with a BFS rod and throw a crankbait smaller than anyone else is throwing at the same efficiency as you're getting with your regular cranking rod. It's like, if you're overlooking that, you know, in today's pressured world, it's like that leads to, you know, bites. So that's been big for me. I have a couple setups we can run through just to, you know, show people what, like, you know, the general idea is.
Go for it.
Really, my main one, I have a Fenix FTX series. It's a 7-1 light, and then I have the Corrado BFS on there with 7-pound fluoro. And that thing is like, if you only were going to buy 1 BFS rod or like just try it, that's what I would buy. It's not like, you know, it's also confusing too, I will say, because it's like true BFS is like out in Japan, there's guys who are like fishing for like little stream trout and throwing like 4-gram lures with like a rod that's 4 foot long. And it's like, okay, that's not what we're, you know, this is like westernized BFS where it's like closer to the power of the spinning rod. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's not true. Like, you know, we're not, you know, dangling little 1-inch trout magnets or whatever in front of trout. You know, it's, you know, you're still trying to catch a bass, and a bass is going to jump and fight and do whatever he's got to do to get off. So you still do need some backbone. So, like, you know, don't get in your head that, like, oh, I'm going to hook a 20-incher and I'm just going to get whipped. Because, I mean, I've landed 20-inch smallmouth on that rod that I just mentioned. And just to, like, go down what it can do is, like, I mean, soft jerk bait, phenomenal. You know, I love fishing a soft jerk bait for smallmouth, like aggressive, you know, just like tap, 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 and like reeling it, just like burning it on top, you know, fishing it hard and fast. And like trying to get a reaction out of them, and like with an 8-to-1 gear ratio and just being able to like repeat casts over and over again, money on the river. And like same thing with like little top waters. Those crush on tidal water. They crush for smallmouth. I know that little megabass Karashi, that thing is getting super popular, and that thing's itty bitty. I don't know if you've ever fished that.
Oh, I do.
That's juice.
It really is. And it's weird for me because like I am smallmouth guy probably first and foremost. So I've been into the BFS stuff, especially when the tinier jerk baits came out. It's like, oh my God, I'm so glad we're getting high quality stuff that's tiny.
Yes.
But you're starting to see it transition more from smallmouth to the largemouth scene, which is interesting. You know, I know the big thing people have been throwing now is like the tiny tube that Z-Man made, but it's like in certain smallmouth circles, that shit's been around forever. It's just you had to know a guy that made
Yeah.
it. It's just now being
Yep.
popularized because a main manufacturer is doing it, and you could be surprised at how light. I guess this will be a week from now, but I had on the Millers and Doc, and I think Jeff Miller, man, he uses 4-pound test for a lot of his smallmouth crap, straight 4-pound mono. And if you set up your system correct, you're not going to have the break-offs. And I think that's the issue is people get nervous with light line, but they're using a rod, I think generally speaking, that's just way too stiff for the line size. And that has to be a system to work together so you don't get that break-off.
100% correct. I totally believe that too. And I mean, I think a lot of people too, you know, they get used to like largemouth fishing and like you got like your 50-pound braid and you're flipping and, you know, you jack them and you just ski them in. And I've never been big on that. I like to hook them and, you know, play it by ear, try to feel what the fish is doing. And honestly, I feel like you get a better sense of what the fish is doing on a BFS rod too. Mm-hmm. And with, you know, like you said, a mashed up system that's, you know, you've weighted out correctly. Everything's lined up. The gear is right for the gear. I mean, I don't have any break off issues. You just, you play the fish, you learn to not wail on them too hard. And, you know, you're getting bites that you otherwise would not have got. And that's, you know, an advantage. And, you know, even like on like the heavier end of it, it's like, you don't have to even be using a light rod. You can go all the way down to like medium light, get even more backbone. Yeah. Like the rod I just mentioned, I'll do like shaky head, Med rig, you know, other stuff that I would do a spinning rod. You know, I already talked about the topwater stuff. You know, and that stuff's all great and all, but kind of what led me down this rabbit hole was, you know, I would catch, you know, good fish on like pressured places like Lake Anna on like a crankbait, but I just hated the spinning rod part of it. And so like before I went to the full, what I would consider like a real BFS, like I think that Fenix setup is, you know, that's pretty true Western BFS. Before that, I had a medium light 7-foot Zodius, and it was like a composite glass rod. And I put a Corrado 70 on that. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can cast like 1/4 ounce crankbaits like they're, you know, like it's anything. Like I can bomb those, I can fish those like I am on my regular crank setup. And like that was really the gateway that opened the door to me. And then I was like, oh, well, I can fish like the baby chatterbait, you know, the little chatterbaits for smallmouth. I can fish, you know, little spinner baits and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, this is like a game changer. And then I sized it down one rod even further. And now with those two, I mean, it's like I can, you know, really cover a lot of different baits that most people just aren't fishing. And, you know, anytime you're doing that, that's an advantage.
Mm-hmm. I think, guys, if you don't know what we're talking about, it's BFS, which is, depending on how you want to break down the acronym, it's Baitcaster Finesse System or Bait Finesse System. I've heard it both ways, but just it's tiny stuff pared down finesse, usually on a baitcaster system. But you can also, in theory, do it with a spinning rod setup. But at that point, it's basically a crappie rod or a trout setup, if you want to visualize it. And yeah, it's very effective too. Just the precision. If you're going to go with the baitcaster setup, for people that don't know, what the baitcaster gives you is that ability to just be very pinpoint, especially let's say if you're wading a creek. You know, you're not going, if you have a spinning rod, you're probably going to hang up when you make a cast. With this, you're very precise with how you're doing it, how you're going about it. And that's just one of the many things, plus the bail and all that other crap that you have to deal with a spinning rod. And the drag system. Some of these BFS reels that they have, Baitcaster BFS reels, they have a really good drag system built in because they know that you're dealing with that lighter line. Now you have to spend a pretty penny, but it's just the equipment's getting better and better and better for you to effectively use it.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, like I was saying earlier, like I'm a power fishing guy through and through, so you wouldn't think BFS would be a big thing to me. But like when I noticed that, like, oh, my patterns are starting to get a little tougher to get on, you know, my regular stuff, Then I leaned on this, and I'm essentially doing like finesse power fishing, like, and it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you might not always have to sacrifice on those tough days where it's like, time to pull out the drop shot. It's like, oh no, I can go fish like a little jig or something, or a little crankbait or a little top water, and they're looking at that thing and they're like, oh, look at that little tiny spook dancing on top of the water. That looks real. That looks like exactly the size of bait I'm eating. And then they crush it like they've never seen a bait before. And it's like, that can be a difference maker as far as just like productivity. You know, I mean, for me, it's almost entirely tournament context, but like also it's a blast. I mean, like when you hook a 20-inch smallmouth on any light tackle, that's going to be fun. And for me, when you do it with a clicking drag bait caster, it's like, man, this is it.
What adjustments do you have to make when you're, like, say you're doing the greenfish tournaments with BFS? Is there any adjustments you make to your tackle because you are in a tournament situation and not for fun, and a break off does mean a big deal?
Yeah, so a lot of times there's some things where it's like some baits I have a little bit harder time. Like it's like the Karashi. Like I know with smallmouth, his mouth isn't as big, so those little hooks, there's a good chance to be able to bury them. With largemouth, it's like if he opens his mouth when I set the hook and I catch him a little bit, and then it's like I'm relying on a little hook. It's like, eh. So I always look into like, can I buy better hooks? Can I buy bigger hooks without sacrificing action? A lot of times for largemouth, like if I know I'm gonna be around grass, I'll switch to a reel with braid on it, just because it's like straight up stronger. I don't want to be messing with 6 pound, 7 pound fluoro deep in some gnats. That's you're asking for a bad time. But I think part of it is just being cognizant about your gear. Just like paying attention to what you're doing and thinking it through. Just being like, okay, let me not put myself in a situation where I'm going to hook a fish I cannot land.
Yep.
So like, because like obviously if you go around and like fish the nastiest stuff you fish with a BFS rod, I mean, it's going to be the same as doing it on a light spinning rod. You're going to have a bad time. It just is what it is. So, part of it's that it's not like it's, totally, you're not fishing with a flipping stick. It's different. But, that's a big part of it. And also I'll put another thing in there, like definitely practice with your equipment. You wouldn't go out and try and learn how to punch on tournament day the same way I wouldn't recommend going out with BFS on tournament day, never having used it. Get familiar with your equipment, know where that like breaking point is, catch a couple good ones on it and be like, okay, I can trust this to land fish. And, if they're coming off, adjust something. Cause I mean, I'm at the point now where like I know a couple other guys. Like earlier, I forgot to mention Josh Reese, another hammer. He picked up BFS, and I had some like short little conversations with him about it. And I was like, okay, there's someone else who like knows what they're doing pretty damn well, and he fishes with it with success in tournament. So it's like I know for a fact it's like I'm not the only guy doing this.
Yeah,
this is like a real. It's the same as the swim bait thing. Like if you're confident enough in a big swim bait or a big bait that you can go out and whack a couple on it tournament day, then power to you. Take the advantages you can get. Anything to get ahead. It's you're fishing for money.
What is your landing procedure with this? Are you? I mean, assuming you're not, but are you boat flipping? Is it? Or like how do you go about it when you're dealing with this lighter stuff?
I mean, I honestly nowadays I pretty much never boat flip. I've just broke off too many good ones, even on like the flipping rod and stuff. Like where it's like, oh, he's hooked good, and I lost a good one at Gunnersville last year because I thought, I was like, oh, this is like a 7-8 pounder, and I just went up to pull him up, and it was like, oh, hook straight up bent out. It was like a one of those super line hooks. It's like, okay, never boat flipping again. But yeah, I mean, I do what I always do. that initial hook set will tell you a lot. Always, you should be looking like after you set that hook, you should be trying to get as much information out of your rod as you can. Like, how good is he hooked? The moment you can see him, where is he hooked? Like, try to get as much information as you can, because, if he's hooked funky, don't let up. You're going to have to play him faster than if he's hooked good, obviously. But for me, it's always encourage him to go low. I know a lot of people, like, I watch, people who fish national trail level stuff for kayaks, and I watch them just high stick every single fish. Like, they'll just jack them and lift their rod straight up in the air. For me, I hate encouraging bass to jump. They love to jump. They're going to try to do it already. So for me, it's always big, like, hook them, stick that rod down to the side and keep pressure. And another good part about BFS is obviously it's a lighter rod, so you're going to get more bend. Always keep the line tight. Always keep the rod bent. Anytime your line's slack, you're just asking for trouble, obviously. And, the more bend, you don't want to go so tight that you're snapping your line, but bend is good. Bend is, giving you something to keep him on and keep him taut. So for me, that's always a big thing. And then just play him slow. I don't, even with big line, I try not to ski him too much, because I just feel like, if you're going to bring him up to the top of the water and just burn him in, you're just giving him a chance to shake his head and throw your hook out. That's how I feel about it, at least. And, I just try to, keep fish tight, let them play out a little bit. I don't like, especially with kayak fishing, in a live well tournament, if you're in a boat and you boat flip that sucker and he's still green and you toss him in the live well, who cares? If he's still green and you bring him in the kayak, you still got to measure that sucker and get a picture. Mm-hmm. So, I know some guys, they like to do the leash thing where you leash and let them calm down. Me personally, I want to get him back in the water as soon as possible. If I got to let him fight out a little bit and, maybe he stops being so lively, that's fine. But I want to get him up, get my picture fast, put him back, just from a conservation standpoint. But yeah, I think it's really just, a matter of, if you can land fish well on a light spinning rod, the mechanics aren't that different. I think, especially like the star drag, it's even easier to adjust on a bait caster. So, just keep them low. Don't let them jump. Keep it tight and get them to the net.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And the only thing I'd add is like just the hook diameter is a big thing that goes into it. I think the bigger the diameter of the hook, the more it is about how much do you want to play them, because that hole is going to get worn versus, playing them versus hauling them in. I think that's an interesting conversation that can be had where if you're dealing with these thicker, bigger hooks, you gotta keep pressure and get them in the boat, because every time they jump, and I'm talking like the 10XD crankbaits, some of the bigger crap but yeah, for this tinier stuff, when you're dealing with these like needle type hooks, like once you get them stuck, I mean, it's hard as hell for them to come unbuttoned. It's not necessarily like impossible, but it's a lot harder with those super sticky sharp hooks for them to chuck them.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. That was a great addition. And honestly, I think like there's a little bit to that too, where it's like, especially practicing weeks out and stuff, it's like, it's a good tool too. Cause I've always thought for a while, like when a fish gets jacked by a big jig hook, or like, he gets 6 crankbait hooks in his face.
Yeah.
I kind of think that's a little bit of why finesse fishing is like, the more consistent bite is because, they get hit on a robo worm and it's just like a little prick. They get pulled in. It's like, okay, that was a little uncomfortable, but it isn't like, getting jacked by,
a shark hook,
6 treble hooks. And you're like, oh, like obviously after that, they're like, man, I don't want to bite another one of those.
Yeah. I agree.
So I don't think they think as negatively about it either, which is nice if you're like, obviously you don't want to go out the day before and crack them before a tournament. But like if you're 2 or 3 weeks out and you stick a couple, I think that they have a better chance of staying there than they do if you're, hitting them with that big jig hook or whatever.
I've been talking to a bunch of guys this year, and it seems like everyone, no matter what genre of fishing you're into, said the topwater bite was off this year. What are your thoughts on that? Like, did you feel like it was a solid topwater year? Or do you think it was just kind of not as good as it used to be?
I definitely don't think it was that good this year. I mean, I honestly wasn't. I looked for it. You always want to look for it because a topwater tournament fish. It almost feels like a free bite. Because it's just like, he just came out of nowhere and smoked it. Awesome. But I definitely ran into that. I always look for a good a popper bite on tidal fisheries. I caught a couple, but like a lot of times on the chick, you'll catch like 19s and 20s on a popper in like the creeks and stuff. And I didn't really ever get a good one. The frog thing wasn't really great for me. I caught a couple pretty good ones on a spook, but even that was like, and then the smallmouth especially, I don't think that you could rely on, a lot of guys, I think they really rely on that morning Chapo plopper bite. And I didn't really feel like that was there that good this year. And, usually that's a river smallmouth staple,
Mm-hmm.
The buzzbait was pretty good for me. But yeah, I would agree that it hasn't been the best topwater year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a pressure thing or what it is, but
partially I think it's a water thing as well. We got so much water this year. I mean, half the year we were in flood conditions, and the last half we were in drought conditions. And I really do wonder how much that played into the topwater bite just being a little off for everyone.
Mm-hmm. I was going to touch on that too. Like with the grass, it's like, you get these water events in the spring and stuff, and it does funky stuff. Grass doesn't come in on some fisheries. It does on others.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't fish many NVKBA events this year. The ones I did, I think I got like 4th on the wrap. And then obviously the Potomac one, I came in 2nd trying to jackpot that. But, it didn't really come in like, 2 years ago on the wrap. Like when I won, it was like everything was choked out, it was like you couldn't go anywhere and not find grass. And this year it's like you find patches, you better mark that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might coincide with it a little bit. It's just like their general habitat, the moods they're in, where they set up, stuff like a frog years when you don't get grass is obviously not going to be as good.
No, dude, 100%. Scott, I mean, I really appreciate you coming on today. Is there anything else that we need to touch on or anything else you want to promote?
I guess just fish VA bass. I think it's only going to get better from here. I've heard rumors about the schedule next year, and even if half of them are what Sean has alluded to, I mean, there's going to be some heaters. I'm talking like known great fisheries that we're going to go to, and then some that like really haven't been touched in the kayak tournament world that will probably be bangers. So keep an eye out for that. I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Guys, as always, link in the episode description to everything that we're talking about here. Go check out NVKBA and the Virginia Bass Nation. Their schedule will be dropping here, I'm assuming in the next couple of months, but you can go check them out on Facebook, and I'll put a link in the episode description to that. And yeah, we will see you guys next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.